Right now, though, I want to turn to some domestic news in the building behind me on Parliament Hill, where Yves-François Blanchet has re-upped his demands on the Liberals and said that the deadline is looming very close. Have a listen.
Nobody is trying to do something and get something done. Everybody is trying to keep things the way they are and say the other party is responsible for what's happening. We are not in that state of mind. We want things to go forward.
The ball is in the government's court. They could do the right thing, move forward on accountability, and Parliament can move ahead. It is also very clear, and you're absolutely right to critique the Conservatives. They are, as one of my House leader says, agents of chaos. No interest in letting Parliament work.
The Bloc's leader, Yves-François Blanchet, says his party could help the Liberals end the ongoing political impasse on Parliament Hill, but it'll come at the cost of supporting his party's two demands: to boost old age security for seniors 65 to 74 and to pass the Bloc's private members' bill on supply management. Since late last month, business on the Hill has been stalled as the Conservatives call for the Liberals to hand over unredacted documents related to a now-defunct green tech fund the Auditor General concluded was mired in conflicts of interest. But the Liberals have so far refused, citing a breach of charter rights, and they need support from another party to help them force the House to move on to other business. While the Bloc leader said he has so far had no conversations with the Liberals, the Deputy Prime Minister had a different response. Have a listen.
We believe truly in having an open door to cooperation with all parties in Parliament. And we have been having some very productive, very sincere conversations with the Bloc. In fact, Jean-Yves and our House leader and Steve McKinnon and I had a long conversation last week talking about their proposals, getting an understanding of what were the core issues that were important to them, and putting forward from our own perspective what we think are the core issues that are important for Canadians, for Quebecers.
All right, let's try and make sense of all of this with the front bench. Saïd Salvem is the Vice President and Practice Lead of Public Affairs at National Public Relations. Jamie Ellerton is a Conservative strategist and the founding partner of Canaptus Limited. Former interim NDP National Director Carl Bélanger is with us. He's now the President of Traction Strategies. And Laura Stone rounds us out. She's a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Jamie, I'll start with you. Is it possible that, the Bloc thinks that there's nothing being discussed and the Liberals think there is something being discussed? Like, how do we make sense of that? Oh, I can't hear you. I think, sorry, I'm just going to make sure that your mic is up. And while that happens, I'm going to throw the same question. Oh, there he is. Okay, sorry, Jamie, go for it. Our apologies.
Yeah, I think this is just the kind of actually what you're seeing is like the ongoing political posturing of political parties debating in real time, both through media and behind closed doors. And I suspect there's some dishonesty and kind of too cute by half messaging going on here. The Bloc clearly thinks they're onto a winning strategy for their own purposes and continuing to kind of drive the table in Parliament, while the Parliament itself, of course, is hung up on a procedural matter as a result of the government trying to shirk accountability and not hand over the documents that Parliament has asked for. And so I think this is going to continue for quite some time.
It's super interesting, Carl, because there's these two separate issues that have really become, an overlap. And the way I said in the introduction, like the government it's this huge, long story. We've talked about it on the show, but basically the House decided that they should, hand over documents unredacted. The government says if we do so, it's a breach of charter rights. The Conservatives say you're not doing it because you have something to hide. So that's all they've been discussing for days now. Because of the way the procedure works, they're able to do so. The Bloc says, hey, we'll help you Liberals force closure on this, but you've got to acquiesce on the stuff we've already demanded you acquiesce on so that we don't vote you out of power. The Liberals say we're having these conversations. The Bloc says, actually, we're not. Where does that leave the federal government right now? On the edge of collapse?
They're getting closer by the day. Yeah. That's for sure. The way the Bloc play this out is actually really smart, because they put a clear deadline and they said, we won't negotiate. So maybe they're having side conversation in the hallways of Parliament. They bump into an MP and they have productive conversation. For the Bloc, they're probably just letting the Liberals talk, but they're not negotiating. They're not moving. They're not changing their mind. So the issue is, will the government delivers on those two issues, right?
Seems like it's black and white.
Very simple.
Right.
Supply management and the pensions for for 65 to 74-year-old seniors. That's very popular issues in Quebec. The Bloc is benefiting. In fact, they're up 6 points since the summer, since they've started playing that poll. It's a poll released by Léger this morning. So it's working in their favor.
So here's the question, Saeed. If the Liberals ultimately come out now and say, we're going to do exactly what the Bloc wants us to, like, does that not cede a lot of ground to the Bloc? Like, is it? It just feels like if they had done it weeks ago, or they had, it had not really seemed pushed into it, they might have been able to create more of a political win out of it. But now it seems like they're taking their marching orders from the Bloc.
It does, and to Carl's point, they do have leverage, and they've had leverage. So the Bloc is in a really good position right now. The Liberals have the most to lose here. So let's say that by the end of the month, they don't give in to the Bloc's demands. The Bloc then backs a non-confidence vote with the Conservatives. In order to bring down the government or to trigger an election, you still need the NDP. And the NDP is kind of the wild card here. I don't believe Singh has expressed interest in voting against the Liberals for the current time being for a number of reasons, whether it could be fundraising, whether it could be the fact that they might not be ready to actually wage an election. But every day that goes by without the Liberals being in a position to actually work with some of these parties, it puts them in a worse and worse position and turns the heat up. They're between a rock and a hard place right now.
The NDP, the wild card is one way to put it, Laura. I listened to the press conference today where reporters were asking Jagmeet Singh, like, what's the deal? What do you want? What's happening? Even on the instance of parliamentary, paralysis, he's like, well, they should hand over the documents, but also the Conservatives should stop. Like, there was no real specific answer provided. How do you think they're going to factor into this?
Yes, and I think you could even hear in that scrum one of the reporters saying, he's not answering the question. And I think that was sort of felt by everyone who was watching and participating in that. But I mean, this is the NDP factor is huge. They're sort of the Liberal government's last lifeline here on a lot of these matters. I think they are trying to somehow negotiate with the Bloc, but as has been made clear by Monsieur Blanchet and on the panel, he's not really too interested in negotiating or backing down in any way. He's been very clear on what he wants. So the Liberals have sort of run into a dead end there. But the NDP has been a very willing dancing partner with the Liberals throughout their time in government. And while they've kind of tried to put on a strong face in recent weeks and say that they're not working with them anymore, I think ultimately, at least right now, the NDP doesn't want an election. They're still trying to distance themselves from the Liberals. They've had a bit of movement in the polls since walking away from their agreement with the Liberal government. But I think Jagmeet Singh still needs more time in order to kind of, play up the independence of his party and send that message to Canadians. But right now, the Liberals are running out of options and the walls are closing in on them. And so to only have kind of one willing partner left and not even a true partner, I think, it probably is worrying them and keeping them up at night as this fight drags on in Parliament.
They do have one other option, Jamie. They could prorogue.
Yeah, and I think it's increasingly looking like they're backed into a corner. I think if you're the PMO, you're going to want to keep your government, and you would prorogue if it gets to that point. But I do think with the NDP kind of dangling in the wind right now, trying to pretend as if they're stomping and opposed to the government while continuing to support them, the NDP right now is the least prepared party to fight a federal election. And I think it would be political suicide for them to allow Parliament to essentially falter and vote non-confidence in this government. I think if you're the government right now, kind of what the path forward is, the Liberals need to find some way to actually reclaim the agenda and look like they're trying to do something. Because right now, whether it's the Conservatives on this accountability stuff or Conservatives on affordability more broadly, with the Axe the Tax message that Pierre Poilievre's been championing, is really dominating the public conversation, and this government's just simply adrift.
I don't know if it's like necessarily that's dominating. What's changed in the last 6 weeks, Carl, is the only thing anyone is talking about is whether or not the government can survive. We're not talking about policy in any way or another. We're not talking about an agenda. Like, there is nothing happening there except for a constant fight to survive.
Yeah, and that's what happens when you don't have a stable agreement like we had under the NDP Liberal agreement. So we have speculation, and it's a fun game. We play that game all the time, and we love to discuss these things and scenarios. And so now we have prorogation as an option.
Freeland says no. I should yesterday.
Yeah,
no,
and Karen Gold said no last week.
No last week.
But
right.
you know, the one who decides is Justin Trudeau, and if he wants to prorogue, he will prorogue. But prorogue because you don't want to lose confidence in the House, prorogue because you don't want to hand over documents to police. What kind of narrative are you going to be able to put together after that when you bring back a new speech from the throne? It's going to be very difficult. I don't think it's an option, but I would say this. I think the NDP would love to have that prorogation to buy some time.
Yeah, that's not a bad, that's a true point, I bet. Last word to you, Saeed. Your thoughts on prorogation? Is it going to happen?
It's hard to say. And again, the only benefit to the Liberals of prorogation, at least from a voter standpoint, is if they use that time to potentially have a convention that could then secure another leader for the party. But will that make a huge difference in the polls? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that they're between that kind of rock and a hard place, which really makes it difficult for them right now. Prorogation is the lesser of many evils for them.
Also depends on if the Prime Minister says, I'm ready to go, which he has not been saying in the least. Okay, I got to leave it there. Laura Stone, Jamie Ellerton, Saeed Salvem, and Carl Bélanger, our front bench. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.